see you guys next week for... So this is new. Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and for the first time in Vinyl Monday history, we are doing the same band back to back. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. If 30-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as on TikTok. Now that we have that out of the way, this is technically part 2 of last week's episode, or maybe this is part 1 and that's part 2 and this is like a Star Wars prequel situation. I don't know. Whatever it is, last week was Fleetwood Mac's other self-titled record. Both last week and this week were supposed to be part of one big long episode. I'm still debating publishing it that way again because I know you guys really like the big long episodes. Let me know if that's something you'd want, but for the rest of us who can't sit down for an hour to listen to me blab about 2 self-titled records, it is 2 separate episodes. I'm really excited to be talking about this week's album. It's very rare that I get to cover a band in its very infancy, and there's no band with quite as long or winding of a history as this one. This group was reborn time after time, with one iteration being of particular significance to the classic rock canon. But they couldn't have reached those heights without their humble yet remarkable beginnings. So today, we are taking it all the way back. This week's album is Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what next week's album is gonna be. Sometimes you can pick what albums you want to see, and you know what? I'll actually host a poll on if you want to see the full unified Fleetwood Mac or not. You can find all of that on my channel. Alright, deja vu all over again. Let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress, hence the retitling on my spine to Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. This was, of course, in response to the commercial success of the other self-titled record 7 years later. I must have bought this in 2021 because my Discogs says I bought this just over 2 years ago, and this is the 2021 reissue from Blue Horizon. To avoid confusion, I will be calling this Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, or PGFM, and this self-titled. I've heard Dog and Dustbin thrown around as an alternate title for this too, after the album art. Not gonna lie, I hope this one catches on, or at the very least, someone uses it as a band name. I totally would, but I have not an iota of musical talent. Now let's talk about the cover art. This one's interesting. Not so much because it's iconic or even very pretty. It's a dog sniffing around a garbage can in some grimy back alley in England. Not a great cover, it's kind of bad actually, but weirdly fitting for a down and dirty blues band. You know I love a good rock and roll mystery, and this is why the PGFM cover interests me. We don't know who took this photo. I can't find a name listed on the album credits or in any source, official or otherwise. It's a classic case of rock and roll in the 60s. Nobody bothered to write it down. On this record, we have the first official lineup of Fleetwood Mac. That's Peter Green on vocals, guitar, and harmonica, Jeremy Spencer on vocals, guitar, and piano, John McVie on bass, and Mick Fleetwood on drums. Bob Brunning plays the bass on Long Grey Mare. Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac was produced by Mike Vernon. Roll transition. Okay, so, in order to fully understand this, we must first understand this. Fleetwood Mac's story begins with another British blues band, one of the big ones in fact. So if you were a guitarist in Britain in the 60s and you wanted to make it anywhere, you had to go through one of these two bands first, the Yardbirds or the Bluesbreakers. While the Yardbirds are most famous nowadays for the spin-off series, you might have heard of them, the Bluesbreakers have just as star-studded of a history. Of course, leader of the Bluesbreakers, and I think the only consistent member throughout their history, John Mayall, one of the best to ever do it. He just turned 90 last year, God bless him. 2/3 of Cream passed through this group, Jack Bruce played bass, and I can't escape this fucker. Future Rolling Stone Mick Taylor came later, and 3 of our major players today passed through this group, beginning with Peter Green. At age 11, Peter caught the rock and roll bug. It's a classic story, really. Older brother brings home guitar, shows kid brother how to play a few chords, and before long, kid brother has outpaced most of the working musicians on the block. His big break comes when Eric Clapton abandons post at the Bluesbreakers without telling anyone. Mayall is like, fuck it, this guy's fired, I'm finding a replacement. He puts an ad in Melody Maker, and Peter answers the call. Fun fact, this album released a month after Clapton got fired. That is so funny to me. In April of '67, Peter is riding high as one of the best guitarists in the scene, but he finds himself in the same spot that Clapton was in 10 months ago, itching to form his own band. Meanwhile, producer Mike Vernon is itching to leave Decca Records to be at independent blues label Blue Horizon full-time. Mayall gives Peter some free studio time at Decca. He brings 2 buddies along with him. Recently fired Bluesbreaker drummer Mick Fleetwood and current Bluesbreaker bassist John McVie. They cut 3 tunes: Looking for Somebody, No Place to Go, and First Train Home, along with a little jam named after the rhythm section, Fleetwood Mac. This session went really well, so well that Peter was like, hey, why don't we just form our own band? Since Mick just got fired and needs the paycheck, he's like, hell yes, but John is like, I don't know, I'm making pretty good money being a bluesbreaker, you know, more than I would be being in some no-name band. I imagine Peter was like, okay, first of all, we are not a no-name band, we have a name, Fleetwood Mac. It's named after you because I really want you to be in this band, please be in this band. Second of all, this guy may be a self-proclaimed rhythm dyslexic, but we are awesome. For real, one time at a pub gig, Peter had to go behind the kit and grab Mick's wrists to physically put him back in time. Anyway, John literally doesn't care that the band is named after him and says no, he's not joining. Peter puts an ad in trusty Melody Maker for a temporary bassist. Only temporary because he was hell-bent on having John. Apparently someone at Melody Maker accidentally swapped 2 digits in the phone number, so Bob Brunning had to call Melody Maker themselves to put him in touch with either Peter or Mike. I don't know whose phone number it was exactly. As for recruiting a second guitarist, in June, a matter of days before Peter announces he's quitting the Bluesbreakers, they play a gig in Litchfield, supported by local group the Levi Set Blues Band. They have a kick-ass slide guitarist, Jeremy Spencer. Now, Peter, he was a quirky, introverted guy. He was a leader, but he wasn't willing to be in the spotlight 100% of the time. Jeremy was a little hellion, with charisma to boot and the guitar skills to back up his attitude. He'd be perfect for Fleetwood Mac. Not unlike Clapton's future bromance with Duane Allman, it seems Peter was already a fan of Jeremy's before they met. He'd heard a Levi demo tape through Mike and loved it. Here's what Jeremy had to say about their first meeting. I walked up to Peter to introduce myself. He said, Jeremy? Jeremy Spencer? Before I said anything. They bonded over their mutual love of Elmore James and B.B. King, grabbed a drink together, and by the end of the night, Jeremy was poached for Fleetwood Mac. After a few weeks of rehearsal, Fleetwood Mac debuted on August 13th, 1967 at the Windsor Jazz and Blues Festival. To begin with, they stuck out like a sore thumb. Cream was in their the Fool design psychedelic regalia, Peter showed up in jeans and a t-shirt. He'd eventually warm up to the velvet robes and amulets and stuff, but for now he doesn't have the budget for that. They bookended their set with Elmore James tunes I Can't Hold Out and Shake Your Moneymaker, plus Fine Little Mama in the middle. The originals they played were I'm Going Home, I Need You to Come On Home to Me, their self-titled song, and The World Keep On Turning. The audience included Steve Winwood of Traffic, Eric Burden of The Animals, and Rolling Stones manager Andrew Oldham. This would have been around the time he threw in the towel with the Stones, though. The enduring Satanic Majesty's debacle proved too much for him. Fleetwood Mac shared the bill with Cream, Jeff Beck, Donovan, and the Blues Breakers. Yes, John was still with them at the time, and yes, Peter begged him to join Fleetwood Mac at the show. Peter, you gotta stop being so thirsty. Though sound issues plagued their set, Melody Maker still said Fleetwood Mac, quote, made an impressive debut, but not better than Clapton. He's still, quote, 240 miles ahead of the other guitarists in his field. It's worth noting the Crazy World of Arthur Brown debuted at that same festival the day before. Arthur was lowered onto the stage by a crane wearing a flaming headdress. I don't care how good Clapton is, there is no beating that. And sometime after the Windsor gig, John finally caves and joins the band that's named after him. 3 weeks later, they hop into the studio as an honest-to-goodness band, but not exactly under the most honest-to-goodness circumstances. So, Mike hadn't yet jumped ship from Decca, or maybe he just did and still had his key to the studio, whatever it was. He sneaks Fleetwood Mac in there in the middle of the night to record half of this album. But only one of those takes actually made it onto the record, Long Grey Mare. Now, most timelines I read had this session happening in September, but I honestly think that's wrong, because if Bob Brunning is here, then surely this must have taken place before John McVie was in the picture. John quit the Blues Breakers in August and said he joined Fleetwood Mac in September. This session would have happened in September. Maybe the groveling phone call took place right after this session. I don't know. I wasn't there. After gigging on the club circuit, Fleetwood Mac releases their debut single in November. Later that month, they hop back in the studio at CBS this time. I guess Mike finally gave his keys back to cut some material, including Merry-Go-Round, Hellhound on My Trail, Cold Black Night, The World Keep On Turning, and a little tune called I Loved Another Woman. If this one sounds familiar, it's because it is. Peter had a vision. He was adamant that this stuff not be cleaned up, it should be as close to the way they sounded live as possible. A December 11th session produces Jeremy Spencer original Don't Dog Your Woman, later retitled to My Heart Beat Like a Hammer, and an Elmore James cover, Shake Your Moneymaker. The track listing of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have My Heart Beat Like a Hammer, followed by Merry-Go-Round. Then Long Grey Mare. Next, Robert Johnson's Hellhound on My Trail. Next, Elmore James's Shake Your Moneymaker, and side 1 closes with Looking for Somebody. Opening up side 2, we have Howlin' Wolf's No Place to Go, followed by My Baby's Good to Me. Next, I Loved Another Woman, then Cold Black Night, The World Keep On Turning. Hey, wait a minute. And the album closes with Got to Move by Homesick James Williamson. Man, blues men have the best nicknames. Blind Willie, Howlin' Wolf, Leadbelly, Homesick James. Fleetwood Mac released their debut album in February of 1968. Though it was their debut album, it wasn't their debut on an album. They served as backing band for Eddie Boyd on his record 7936 South Roads. While PGFM barely broke the top 200 over here, it was a big hit in the UK. It peaked at number 4 on their albums charts. Shake Your Moneymaker was the promo single. 2 other singles were released, a cover of Little Willie John's Need You So Bad, and a rewrite of I Loved Another Woman. This one was inspired by Peter's girlfriend at the time and became... Yes, this is a Fleetwood Mac original. I encounter lots of people who think Carlos Santana wrote it because he was the one who made it the most famous, but no, it's Fleetwood Mac. Both audiences and critics gobbled this one up. Melody Maker called it, quote, the best English blues LP ever released. A follow-up was hastily slapped together, I'm talking in like 4 days, Mr. Wonderful. Today, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac is considered a highlight of the 60s British blues boom, but it's not talked about nearly as much outside of this sphere. Not like Cream or the Yardbirds are anyway. So, what do I think of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac? Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. That would be such a sick Vinyl Monday. Get some Grateful Dead and Bob Marley in for my mom. She would love that. My mom is totally a closet hippie. Going in. Believe it or not, I have a real life outside of this. Not much of one, but still there's some of it. Due to the scheduling of a visit back home, I listened to Fleetwood Mac and Fleetwood Mac in tandem. What a fucking trip that was! Although the past 2 weeks of albums share a name, they're essentially 2 different bands. But Fleetwood Mac did not just become a pop group out of nowhere. It was an evolution that took years to complete. Take Albatross, for example. It inspired the Beatles to make Sun King. With the sad departures of Peter and Jeremy, we lost one to acid and the other to a fucking cult. Fleetwood Mac gained Danny Kerwin and Christine McVie. Songs like Dragonfly were carried well by Danny's softer voice. Mick's wife, Jenny Boyd, yes, sister to her, she wrote Dragonfly's B-side, Purple Dancer, and she co-wrote Jewel-Eyed Judy. Then came the entire Bob Welch era, tunes like Future Games, Hypnotized, and Emerald Eyes. So no, you boorish, elitist doof, Stevie Nicks did not ruin Fleetwood Mac. The road to this was set in motion pretty much as soon as this was released. Around 2019 was when I first dipped my toe into the blues-based bands. It started with the Clapton projects, Derek and the Dominoes, and Cream. That's Sideways. I feel like I've done that before. Then I eventually made my way out to the Yardbirds via my intense Led Zeppelin phase in college. As a youngin' classic rock fan, one of the uninitiated, I had no idea this iteration of Fleetwood Mac existed until Peter Green's passing in 2020. And even then, I might not have known, if not for Greta Van Fleet? Running in tandem with my Zeppelin phase was my Greta Van Fleet phase. Cover your ears, crotchety boomers! The reason I got into Led Zeppelin was because of Greta Van Fleet. Oh, how I loved Greta Van Fleet, and my very first fave rave was Jake Kiska. What can I say? I have an unfortunate predilection for guitarists. Except if we're talking about frontmen, then I pick some really fucking weird looking ones. Anyway, Jake is a devotee of all the American roots artists and all the British guys that followed their lead, including Peter Green. When Peter's passing was announced, he simply posted My Heart Beat Like a Hammer to his Instagram story, which I of course had my notifications on for, and now here we are. Like many fans who look like me, I discovered the blues backwards. You know, we hear Cream's Crossroads, wonder where it came from, and discover Robert Johnson. Or we get into the fucking weeds with Led Zeppelin song credits and get Willie Dixon. I discovered my personal favorite of the blues greats, John Lee Hooker. I would sell my soul to own this album through my favorite band, the MC5. Rob Tyner has not once led me astray. And when I got into Elmore James through my personal connection to Trevin Ellison and his band Humble Fish, I made the connection to this. My Heart Beat Like a Hammer uses the dust my broom lick. Through this specific interpolation, the entire rich and beautiful history of the blues opened up for me. The greats paved the way, and guys like Fleetwood Mac widened the path. These groups were the gateway for the vast majority of people who look like me to get into the blues in the 60s, and still are today. There's something to be said for that, whether it's the talent that these guys have, or the leg up they had in the music industry for simply being white dudes. Or maybe it's both. On to the music. If you've been around here long, you know that I generally prefer stuff that isn't super staged, done up. So, you know, the exact opposite of me. So I really like that a lot of the incidental between songs junk was left in. The warm-up before My Heart Beat Like a Hammer, the quick clip of What I Say before Shake Your Moneymaker. This noodling gave me a feel for the band's chemistry and their personalities. It was one of my favorite things about this record. Keyword was. For the first year of me knowing PGFM, I had only heard it on streaming services. Then I bought it on vinyl and discovered that all of that incidental stuff was cut out on the original release because it was 1968. Of course it was. Having heard both versions, I really don't know how I feel about this decision because it removes the material from its original context. A very green group stacked with very experienced players cutting all of this stuff in 1 or 2 takes. It's all the time they had because it's all the money they had, and they were so good they could slam this shit out in 1 or 2 takes. So we have 2 guitarists here. That's the thing about this era of Fleetwood Mac. Though the band is named for the rhythm section, the guitarists are really the star of the show. And both of them sing. Peter's voice sits a little lower in his chest. He does the down-tempo stuff. Jeremy's sits a little higher in his throat. It gives him a raspy quality. He's got a peculiar affect about him, a really American bluesman tone, but filtered through a British accent that once you hear it, you cannot unhear. He's got a snarl, does a lot of little ad-libs, isn't afraid to have a voice break or 3, and has the attitude needed to carry the up-tempo numbers. He is deadass one of my favorite things about this album. Jeremy Spencer's voice was sexy, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. He kicks off the record with one of the best songs, if not the best song here, My Heart Beat Like a Hammer. When we have an opening this strong, I get concerned about the rest. This song is about the narrator waking up and instantly regretting how he treated his woman the night before, specifically giving her the cold shoulder and how he's paranoid she's gonna run off and get her rocks off with somebody else. As goes it with the blues, this is pretty minimal lyricism, using the minimum amount of words so the players can do the legwork. Basically, minimum effort, maximum results. And that's where everyone else picks up. Jeremy's got this song just dripping in personality with ad-libs, antics, and slide licks to boot. This tune establishes the chemistry between Jeremy and Peter. They were a great match. Peter's phrasing is lively and makes a solid core. This was the song that won me over on early Fleetwood Mac. It's one of the highlights of the record for sure. Merry-Go-Round is our introduction to the band leader, Mr. Peter Green. The song is about finding true love that goes on forever, like a merry-go-round, which I typically associate with a lot of ups and downs, but whatever works for you, Peter. We have this real shiner of an opening line. When I first met you, babe, I didn't even know your name. No you didn't. But it's fine because our rhythm section gets their time in the sun. Mick's riding that hi-hat in a jazzy way, and the more minimal approach this song allows the space for John to just chug away on the bass, under Peter's solo. Peter's playing style is a lot more about notes and placement of the notes than, say, speed or volume. I can see why he was deemed a worthy replacement for Clapton. Then we have the worst song here, Long Grey Mare. I cringe so hard at this one. Comparing your woman to a horse is one thing, but an old horse? No wonder she won't let you ride anymore, man! There is absolutely no variation in this instrumentation to be found. The central motif is frankly pretty grating. I gladly skip this one every time. Jeremy does Hellhound on My Trail. It's just him and the piano. I quite like his playing. I appreciate the nod to Delta Blues King Robert Johnson by the inclusion of this song, but it's just a fragment. It reads like a demo. Props to Jeremy for, taking a stab at this one, but I'm not sure this should have made the final cut. Yeah, we're not even through side 1 yet, and there have been high highs and the lowest lows. Thankfully, we are pulled out of the ditch by the highest high here. A lot of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac is deeply indebted to the stylings of Elmore James. He was one of the artists Peter and Jeremy first bonded over, so it was a natural choice to have his signature song, Shake Your Moneymaker, represented. I can't decide which recording I like more, this one or the Paul Butterfield Blues Band version. This one did give us Break On Through to the Other Side by the Doors. I play this one like 6 times in a row whenever I allow myself to listen to it, and that happens with this version too. The rhythm section is rock solid here. John's rocking that walking bass line, and I really like the variations he put on it under the guitar solo. It keeps the momentum going. This is one of Peter's best moments. His boisterous galloping riff is the perfect match for Jeremy's personality. They have their call and response bit at the beginning before launching into the song. Jeremy is just a darling on this one. You can hear him smiling. He was absolutely feeling himself on this day. I don't know what was in the air in that December 11th session that gave us My Heartbeat Like a Hammer and this, but whatever it was, they should have bottled it. By the end, everyone's shed their inhibitions and we've just gone full tilt. If you are not up and dancing by now, then we are not the same. Rounding out side 1 is Looking for Somebody, a simple song about just being a blues man. I got a feeling blues gonna be my way. This harmonica, a lot more listenable than Long Grey Mare. This tune is so short and minimal that it reads as unfinished, but it's got a certain charm to it. Mixed circular boom, cut, boom, bada, boom, cut, boom. Makes this one a really easy, groovy listen. I usually talk about song structure in this chapter, picking out unique stuff going on, but for this album, I just can't, because this is all 12-bar blues. Think about the state of the blues boom in 1968. John Mayall has veered off into the jazz direction, where he'll stay for a few years, and both Cream and the Yardbirds have gone into heavy psych. Fleetwood Mac did not do this. They stayed the course. They are a straight-up blues band. So if you're not actively listening, this stuff can get homogenous, especially through side 2, which is a shame because it affected my enjoyment of some really great songs. Side 2 starts with No Place to Go. I love me some Howlin' Wolf, so you know I was gonna love this one. Peter really is doing his best Chester impression here. He sang from his belly and it really sells the song, mean, mistreating woman messing up this guy's life because women are just a problem in the blues. Hold the fucking phone. For years, I thought Led Zeppelin's How Many More Times, closing out, I don't know why I did this, was based on How Many More Years because, well, that's just what everyone says. Listen to No Place to Go. That is the same bass line. Those lyrics are a lot more similar. And you know what? It's a great bass line. I'm glad they used it. All the players come together here on this smooth, sexy, bumping atmosphere that I want from my blues. The only thing I long for is Jeremy jumping in on piano like Howlin' Wolf's recording had. My Baby's Good to Me. This is where the redundancy of the blues format really starts to affect this record. I really like My Baby's Good to Me on its own. It's cool to hear how Jeremy's phrasing with the slide mimics his own vocal ad-libs. But when it's crowded by all of these very similar tunes, the record starts to lose me. This great song loses its shine. But like I said, I do like this song. Maybe the best part is Jeremy being so struck by this girl's beauty that he cannot finish his sentence. Isn't that what we all want? Ah yes, the Black Magic Woman song. Though I vastly prefer the rewrite, it's nice to see where that song came from. I Loved Another Woman is another shining moment for Mick. His drumming is the foundation for this song's famously spooky, smoky feel. Great choice by production to keep Peter's solo so open. Hearing the natural echo of the room was a great atmospheric touch. Cold Black Night is a much more successful nod to the Delta blues than Hellhound was. Having the whole band here really helps along Jeremy's ability to deliver a down-tempo song. The opening trill is an appropriately bone-chilling kickoff to a song about the narrator's girl leaving him in the middle of the night. Some of the best slide playing on the record for sure. But this song kind of pitters off after that until the very end when it fades out altogether too soon. I am a volume junkie. Give me that full send. Yes, you did hear that right from the last chapter of the video. This album has a song called The World Keep On Turning, and the second self-titled has a song called World Turning. Spooky coincidence. Oh, this acoustic work is good. Between the walks up and down, the muted strums, and flitting delicate finger picking. Like, Jeremy is Mr. Sexy Voice, but something about Peter here has me glued to this song. An understated but nevertheless stunning moment like this reminds me why the record is called Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. And finally, the "if you don't live here or aren't fucking somebody who lives here, then please leave" song, Got to Move. This is the number that really sells the "this is what we sound like live" approach. It feels like I unwittingly walked into the bar in the middle of the song and oh hey, it's already last call. Got to Move is a good enough closer, but it only makes me wonder why we didn't do, you know, a full live Cheap Thrills kind of deal, if not a straight up live album. Is this a perfect package? Far from it. From lyrics that have aged like milk to an unfortunate tendency to get its tires stuck in the mud musically, PGFM has some rough patches. But you cannot deny the musicianship of each of these guys. They were all stars in their own right. And when you put them all together, when they can get over the hump and finally lock into a groove to deliver something, the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. The high points are truly some of the best the British blues craze had to offer. Fleetwood Mac didn't just know metamorphosis. They were metamorphosis. Though they'd become something entirely different in 7 very chaotic years, there's magic in this record. They had it long before the days of Welsh goddesses and black magic women. There's no way any of these guys could have foreseen the insanity that was to come. Maybe it's just my perspective from the future, but I can almost hear it in the voices and the playing. Optimism, anticipation, the excitement in their bellies, feeling something big is gonna come. This is the magic of beginnings. My personal favorites on this one are My Heartbeat Like a Hammer, Shake Your Money Maker, No Place to Go, and The World Keep On Turning. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. What do you think of this album? What do you think of this period in the band's history? Or any of the periods of the band's history. Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet tells you, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!